He thought everything was fine. They still had dinner together. They still laughed at the same old jokes. Their calendar was full. Birthdays, bills, work schedules, weekend brunches with friends. From the outside, they looked like any other couple. But something had changed. He couldn't name it. He couldn't point to a moment where it all began. But he could feel it, in the way her shoulders slumped when she came home, in the pauses during conversations that stretched just a little too long, in the way she looked past him instead of into him. She wasn't angry, she wasn't cold, but she wasn't there, not fully. And that terrified him more than anything else. He tried everything he knew, cooked dinner, surprised her with coffee, offered to do the dishes. He asked if she was okay, gently at first, then with worry. But each time she smiled softly and said, "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. He knew. She was carrying something, and whatever it was, he wasn't being let in. When she finally shared a bad day at work, a memory that lingered, a friend who let her down, he jumped to help. "Talk to HR," he said. "Ignore her texts. Next time, say this." But each time her face dimmed. The more he fixed, the more she closed. And he didn't understand why. He thought love meant doing something, taking action, making it better. So why did every solution drive her further away? One night, after one of those conversations, she left the room without a word. Not in anger, just tired. He sat alone, staring at the door, and for the first time, he didn't feel like the problem solver. He felt like the problem. It hit him slowly, quietly, almost like a whisper from his own memory. He remembered when she once told him about her father passing. He didn't know what to say back then, so he didn't say much. He just sat beside her, held her hand, stayed present. That night, she looked at him through tear-filled eyes and said, "You make me feel safe." No advice, no fixing, just being there. Maybe somewhere along the way, he forgot that. Maybe he'd replaced presence with performance. Maybe he'd mistaken answers for intimacy. Now, the silence between them wasn't soft. It was distant, cold. And unless something changed, it would keep growing. That night, he didn't plan a fix. He didn't make a speech. He just sat there, thinking about how he used to listen, really listen, without rushing to patch the pain. And maybe, just maybe, that's where he needed to begin again. The change didn't come right away. For days, he tried to say less. When she spoke, he nodded instead of answering. When she looked tired, he asked, "Do you want to talk or just sit with me?" She usually chose silence, and still, something in her eyes said she noticed. But then came the night everything cracked. It started like so many evenings before. She walked in, dropped her keys on the table, and let out a long breath. He watched her move through the house like a ghost wearing her own skin. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for help. She just disappeared into the bedroom, shutting the door with a softness that still felt loud. He waited a few minutes, then followed, not with anger, just concern. She sat on the bed, legs crossed, eyes focused on nothing. He asked gently, "Is there anything I can do?" She didn't respond, so he sat next to her, unsure whether to reach out or stay still. After a moment, she whispered, "I'm just tired." He nodded. Okay. He meant it. No suggestions, no fixes, just okay. But something in her cracked. She turned to him, voice trembling, eyes holding back a dam of pain, and said, "You always try to fix me. Every time I open up, you turn it into a problem to solve. I don't need solutions. I just need you." The words hit like thunder in a quiet room, not because they were loud, but because they were true. He wanted to speak, to explain, to defend, to say it wasn't meant that way, but for once, he didn't. He sat with it. Let it sting, let it breathe. She looked away, ashamed maybe, afraid she'd said too much. But all he said after a long pause was, "I hear you." And he meant it. There was no dramatic hug, no music swelling in the background. Just two people sitting in the quiet aftermath of truth, finally spoken. That night, they didn't talk much more. But something shifted. Not in words, but in weight. The heaviness between them grew lighter. She curled into his side before sleep, something she hadn't done in weeks. And as they lay in the dark, he repeated the words in his head like a mantra. "I don't need to fix her. I just need to be here." It sounded so simple, but it felt like everything. The next morning, things felt different. Not louder, not brighter, just lighter. She didn't say anything special. She made coffee, fed the cat, left a note on the fridge that said, "Don't forget to eat today." Just like old times. But for him, it felt like the first ray of sun after a long gray season. He knew one night couldn't erase everything, and he didn't want it to. What mattered wasn't rushing to fix their relationship. It was learning how to truly be in it. Fully. Quietly. Honestly. So he made a decision. From that day forward, whenever she spoke, he would listen. Not to respond, not to win, not to make things better, but simply to understand. It was harder than he expected. The next time she vented about work, his instinct kicked in fast. "You should quit. You deserve better. Have you updated your resume?" But instead of saying those words, he bit his tongue. He looked her in the eye and just said, "That sounds exhausting." She blinked, surprised. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Yeah," she whispered. "It really is." That small exchange felt like something sacred, like trust being offered again in tiny pieces. He started doing more of it, listening without interrupting, letting her finish, even when the silence between sentences made him uncomfortable, asking, "Do you want advice, or just someone to hold space right now?" And sometimes she'd smile and say, "Just be here." So he was. Sometimes they sat on the porch together, watching the sun go down in silence. Other times she spoke about fears, memories, insecurities. He learned to nod, to breathe deeply, to resist the urge to jump in. He realized how often people talk just to be heard, not to be corrected. He also started noticing how much lighter he felt when he stopped trying to fix everything. As if the pressure to solve, perform, and be useful had kept him from just being present, not only with her, but with himself. The more he listened, the more she opened. She started sharing more of her day, her dreams, even her regrets. Not always big things. Sometimes it was as small as, "I miss my mom," or "I hated my hair today." But every word was a thread being rewoven between them. And in return, he noticed something beautiful. She started listening to him too. He talked about his own stresses, his own doubts, things he hadn't voiced in years because he'd been so busy trying to be the strong one. And for the first time in a long time, he felt heard. Not managed, not judged, just held in the same quiet way he was now learning to hold her. Their conversation slowed down, deepened, became less about solving life and more about sharing it. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, love returned. Not the loud, exciting kind from the beginning, but the quiet kind, the solid kind. the kind built in small moments, with no fireworks, just presence. It didn't happen overnight, but it happened, one conversation at a time. It wasn't some grand moment that told him things had changed. There was no dramatic speech, no tearful embrace in the rain. It was smaller than that. It was in the way she reached for his hand while watching TV. The way she lingered just a little longer in the morning before leaving for work. The way she looked at him, not with distance, but with softness. Like he was familiar again, safe again. And he noticed it all, quietly, gratefully. He didn't ask for more. He didn't rush it. He simply stayed. One evening, she came home, kicked off her shoes, and sank into the couch beside him. "Today was awful," she said, without hesitation. He turned to her and asked gently, "Want to talk about it? Or just sit?" She looked at him for a moment and smiled. "Let's just sit." They sat in silence, no TV, no phones, just the hum of the room and the quiet comfort of each other's presence. He felt her body lean ever so slightly toward his, and in that small shift, he felt everything. Their love had never left. It had just been buried under the noise of trying too hard, of doing too much, of speaking too quickly, and now, with fewer words, with deeper attention, it was returning. Slowly, gently, like something long lost finding its way home. He noticed the way her voice softened when she spoke to him now. How she asked about his day, not out of habit, but with real interest. She laughed again, the kind of laugh that comes from feeling safe enough to be silly. She touched his arm in the kitchen as she passed, whispered "thank you" more often, lingered in his gaze a few seconds longer than before. These weren't big things, but love is built in the small things, and he was finally paying attention. One night, while they were getting ready for bed, she said something that stopped him. "I feel like you really see me again." He looked up, toothbrush still in hand, and simply said, "I do." And he meant it. Not because he had figured her out or solved her sadness, but because he had learned the one thing that mattered more than answers: presence. He didn't always know the right thing to say. Sometimes he still wanted to jump in, to offer solutions. But he'd pause now. He'd ask first. He'd check in. And more often than not, she'd just say, "Just be here." And he was. Not perfectly, but fully. He once believed that love meant always having an answer. That if someone you cared about was hurting, the only way to show you loved them was to fix what was broken. That silence meant failure. That not knowing what to say meant weakness. But now, he understood something different. That love doesn't always sound like advice. Sometimes it sounds like breathing together in the quiet. Sometimes it's sitting with someone's pain without touching it, letting it unfold in its own time. Sometimes it's saying, "I'm here," and meaning it, fully, honestly, without expectation. He learned that not every problem needs a solution. Not every tear needs a tissue and a plan. Some things simply ask to be witnessed. And in being that witness, in staying close when it's uncomfortable, in listening when it's messy, in holding space without filling it, that's where love breathes. They still had hard days. Life didn't magically become perfect. But now, when she needed to talk, she knew he'd stay with her in the hard, not above it, not outside of it, with her. And that made all the difference. She smiled more. He felt more grounded. Their home, once filled with quiet distance, now felt quiet in a different way, peaceful, connected, alive. And maybe that's what most of us are looking for. Not someone to solve us, but someone to stay with us. To be a steady presence in a world that's constantly trying to fix, change, optimize. To be the person who listens, not because they know the answer, but because they care enough to stay. So, if you're listening to this and you've been trying to fix everything, trying to say the perfect thing, trying to hold your relationship together with advice and effort, maybe the greatest thing you can offer is your presence. Sit, listen, breathe with them, let them be. And in that stillness, something sacred might grow. Thank you for being here, for listening to this story, and for staying until the end. If this reminded you of someone, maybe share it with them. Or better yet, just sit with them tonight. No advice, no fixing. Just be there. Because sometimes, being there is the most powerful thing we can do.